या चक्षुरुन्मिलितं श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्य मनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरोन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नामने गौरतुषे नमः। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So last time we had discussed about Ragatmika Bhakti. So Ragatmika Bhakti is of two types. That is Kama Rupa and Sambandha Rupa. So Kama Rupa is found in the gopis of Vrindavan, in Madhuri Ras, and Sambandha Rupa is the other relationships of Dasya, Sakya, and Vatsalya. So we also saw that this Ragatmika Bhakti is mainly found in the residents of Vrindavan, the Vrajvasis, and they're all Nitya Siddha associates of the Lord. So nobody can take their place. Their positions are fixed eternally. Like Nanda and Yashoda, Sridama, Sudama. Okay, so now we will go ahead with Raganuga Bhakti.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, that slideshow, you have to do it again.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, Prabhuji.
So Raganuga Bhakti, so Rupa Goswami says, Virajantim abhivyaktam brajavasi janadishu ragatmikam anushrita yasa raganugochate. Raganuga Bhakti is defined as that bhakti which follows after the Ragatmika Bhakti found distinctively in the inhabitants of Braja. Okay, so Anuga means follows. So that bhakti which follows after the Ragatmika Bhakti found in the inhabitants of Braja. Okay, so same thing. So the full definition of Raganuga Bhakti is devotional service and spontaneous love is vividly expressed and manifested by the inhabitants of Vrindavan. Devotional service that accords with their devotional service is called as Raganuga Bhakti, or devotional service following in the wake of spontaneous loving service. So basically it's following in the footsteps of the Ragatmika devotees. So this is also of two types. So from these two types of Ragatmika Bhakti, so the Ragatmika Bhakti is Siddha Bhakti, it's perfected Bhakti. But Raganuga is Sadhana Bhakti. Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti is of two types, Kamanuga and Sambandha Anuga Bhakti. Okay, qualification for Raganuga Bhakti. So somebody can read from the book, chapter 16, eligibility for spontaneous devotional service.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Chapter
Right.
16, spontaneous devotion further described. Eligibility for spontaneous devotional service. Persons desiring to follow in the footsteps of such eternal devotees of the Lord as Vishnus and Vrindavana Dingians are called Raganuga devotees, which means they are trying to attain to the perfection of those devotees. These Raganuga devotees do not follow the regulative principles of devotional service very strictly, but by spontaneous nature, they become attracted to some of the eternal devotees such as Narada or Yashoda.
Nanda.
Sorry. Such as Nanda or Yashoda, and they try to follow in their footsteps spontaneously. There is a gradual development of the ambition to become like a particular devotee, and this activity is called Raganuga. We must always remember, however, that such eagerness to follow in the footsteps of the denizens of Vraja or Vrindavana is not possible unless one is freed from material contamination. In the following, the regulative principles of devotional service, there is a stage called Anartha Nivritti, which means the disappearance of all material contamination. Sometimes someone is found imitating such devotional love, but factually he is not freed from anarthas or unwanted habits. It has been seen that a so-called devotee proclaims himself a follower of the Nanda, Yashoda, or the gopis, while at the same time his abominable attraction for mundane sex life is visible. Such a manifestation of divine love is mere imitation and has no value. When one is actually spontaneously attracted to the loving principles of the gopis, there will be found no trace of any mundane contamination in his character. Therefore, in the beginning, everyone should strictly follow the regulative principles of devotional service, according to the injunctions of the scriptures and the spiritual master. Only after the stage of liberation from material contamination can one actually aspire to follow the footsteps of the devotees in Vrindavana. Continue, Prabhu.
Yes.
It is said by Sri Rupa Goswami, when one is actually liberated from the material contamination, he can always remember an eternal devotee in Vrindavana in order to love Krishna in the same capacity. And developing such an aptitude, one will always live in Vrindavana, even within his mind. The purport is that if it is possible, one should go and physically be present in Rajabhumi, Vrindavana, and be engaged always in the service of the Lord, following the devotees in Rajadharma, the spiritual realm of Raja. It is not possible. If it is not possible, however, to be physically present at the Vrindavana, one can meditate anywhere upon living in that situation. Wherever he may be, one must always think about the Vrajadharma and about.
No, it's not dharma, it's dham.
Vrajadharma, sorry. Life in Vrajadharma and about following in the footsteps of particular devotee in the service of the Lord.
Okay. So here, Guru Goswami is giving a verse. Tat bhavati madhurye shrute dhir yad apekshate natra shastram na yuktim cha tal labodpatti lakshanam. When an advanced realized devotee hears about the affairs of the devotees of Vrindavan in the mellows of Shanta Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya and Madhurya, he becomes inclined in this way and his intelligence becomes attracted. Indeed, he begins to covet that particular type of devotion. When such covetousness is awakened, one's intelligence no longer depends on the instruction of Shastra, revealed scripture, logic, or argument. So, who is qualified for Raganuga Bhakti? As I said over here, Rupa Goswami is saying, when an advanced, realized devotee, and Srila Prabhupada is explaining that only when anartha nivritti is complete, that means only after all the material contamination is removed, then only one becomes qualified for Raganuga Bhakti. So it is not something that one can decide on one's own, not that one thinks that, okay, from tomorrow I'll start Raganuga. No. So one has to be completely freed from all material contamination. Okay, so it's almost like the liberated platform when one is totally free from all material contamination. And at that stage, he becomes attracted to one of these eternal residents of Raja, okay, the Ragatmika devotees. And then he begins to aspire for that particular type of devotion. So it said that at that time, one's intelligence no longer depends on the instruction of Shastra, logic, or arguments, or as Prabhupada writes, these Raganuga devotees do not follow the regulatory principles of devotional service very strictly, but by spontaneous nature, they become attracted to some of the eternal devotees' knowledge. So when it's said that they don't follow the regulative principles strictly, it means that their impetus for devotional service is not based on instructions of Guru or Shastra, but they are spontaneously attracted. That is the point. Okay, it's not that they don't follow the instructions of Guru or the Shastra, but that is not the impetus for devotional service. The impetus for devotional service is a spontaneous attraction. Okay, so we all read this. Okay, so this is from a lecture of Giraj Maharaj. Somebody can read.
Hare Krishna. If someone hears about the love of residents of Vrindavana for Krishna, and if he thinks, I am so lowly, I am so fallen, that is such a high thinking. I could never have that. That is not greed. Greed is, I may be a fool, I may be a rascal, I may be nonsense, but still I must have it, and somehow or other I must get it. I must get it. That is greed, no reservation. It doesn't mean that he doesn't follow the process, but he follows the process out of greed. So if he has greed, he will follow the same process that the devotees in Vaidhi Bhakti follow, but he won't follow with the idea that the scriptures say that he has to do it. He will follow it with the idea that in the end, I'll get what I want.
Okay, so he follows the same process, the same rules and regulations of Vaidhi Bhakti, but he follows them out of greed. Okay, greed to attain the Supreme Lord, or greed to follow in the footsteps of the eternal residents of Raja. So with that greed, he follows the various rules and regulations of Vaidhi Bhakti. So it is not because the Shastra is saying or Guru is saying, that is why he does not follow, but it is more spontaneous. That is the point. Okay, then the next point is practicing Raganuga Bhakti. So Rupa Goswami says, Krishnam smaran janam chasya preshtam nija samhitam tat katha ratas chasau kuriyad vasam braje sada. The devotee should always think of Krishna within himself and should choose a very dear devotee who is a servitor of Krishna in Vrindavan. One should constantly engage in topics about that servitor and his loving relationship with Krishna, and one should live in Vrindavan. If one is physically unable to go to Vrindavan, he should mentally live there. So that we have read from Prabhupada's book also, that as Prabhupada says, when one is actually liberated from material contamination, he can always remember eternal devotee of Vrindavan in order to love Krishna in the same capacity. And developing such an aptitude, one will always live in Vrindavan, even within the mind. So one can either physically live in Vrindavan, or if that is not possible, one can mentally live in Vrindavan. So the first point is meditate on the relation of service between Krishna and his dear devotee according to one's devotional aspiration. And the person who aspires to constantly remember Krishna and his devotees advised to physically or mentally take shelter of Vrindavan. So now, okay, before we go into this, we'll read from Prabhupada's book. A devotee who's actually advanced in Krishna consciousness, who's constantly engaged in devotional service, should not manifest himself, even though he has attained perfection. The idea is that he should always continue to act as a neophyte devotee as long as his material body is there. Activities in devotional service under regulative principles must be followed even by the pure devotee. But when he realizes his actual position and relationship with the Lord, he can, along with the discharging of regulative service, think within himself of the Lord under the guidance of a particular associate of the Lord and develop his transcendental sentiments in following that associate. Okay, so this is a very important point that Srila Prabhupada is mentioning here, that one who's actually advanced, he does not manifest himself, but externally continues to act as a neophyte devotee as long as his material body is there. Okay, so devotional service is not meant for advertisement. It's not that one who's on these advanced stages of Raganuga, Bhava, and Prema, it's not that he advertises himself that now I'm advanced, so now you can follow me and things like that. So one who is actually advanced in devotional service actually becomes humble. That is the symptom of advancement. Because as one advances in devotional service, he realizes more and more about the glories of the Supreme Lord. And at the same time, he realizes his own insignificant position as a spirit soul. And so therefore, he naturally becomes more humble. Therefore, an advanced devotee never advertises himself. And as Srila Prabhupada is mentioning, he continues to act as a neophyte. He's not a neophyte, but he continues to act as a neophyte like any other devotee, following all the rules and regulations of Vedic sadhana bhakti. It is not that when one becomes advanced, then one thinks, oh, now I don't have to follow rules and regulations. Now I can do whatever I want. No, that's not the symptom of an advanced devotee. And therefore, we find even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying the symptoms of the Mahatma. Sadadam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dridabhrataha. So actually, with great determination, he follows all the rules and regulations of devotional service. So it's not that he abandons the rules and regulations. So therefore, the advanced stages of devotional service are not for a show, are not for advertisements. It is actually something which is totally internal. Externally, he continues to act like any other neophyte devotee. And this is very important because, as we will be discussing now, so sometimes the especially Sahajiyas in Vrindavan, they advertise themselves as being very advanced, as being associates of the Lord, gopis and things like that. And that's how they allure other devotees to become their followers. And unfortunately, due to not having proper understanding of the tattva, quite a few of our ISKCON devotees got attracted to such Sahajiyas in Vrindavan. This is because of not having a proper understanding of the tattva. And so therefore, one should never become allured to such advertisements that I'm on Raganuga platform, you come to me, I'll give some secret mantra, and now you can also come on the Raganuga platform and things like that. And so therefore, one should always know that if somebody is advertising himself as an advanced devotee, then actually he is not on an advanced platform. So we find that actually advanced devotees like Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in the Chaitan Charitamrita, he says that I am worse than Jagai and Madhai, lower than the worm in the stool. So in this way, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami considers himself to be so low, very genuinely. And so that's the quality of the pure devotee. So now, this verse that Rupa Goswami is saying here, Seva sadhaka rupena siddha rupena chatrahi tad bhava lipsuna karya vraja lokanusarataha. The advanced devotee who is inclined to spontaneous loving service should follow the activities of a particular associate of Krishna's in Vrindavan. He should execute service externally as a regulative devotee, as well as internally from his self-realized position. Thus, he should perform devotional service both externally and internally. Okay, so there are two aspects here of this Raganuga sadhana. Seva, sadhaka rupena and siddha rupena. Okay, so there is sadhaka rupena and siddha rupena. So externally, his practice is sadhaka rupena, like any other sadhaka. So as I mentioned here, execute service externally as a regulative devotee. So externally, he's acting just like any other Vedi sadhaka. But internally, he acts from his self-realized position, or he acts in relationship with the particular eternal associate of the Lord in Vrindavan. So that is Siddha Rupena. So that's how the Raganuga practice has these two aspects, the external aspect and the internal aspect. So Sadhaka Rupena, Sadhaka Rupa refers to the physical body of the practitioner, and the Siddha Rupa refers to the body which is suitable for one's desired service and which has been developed by internal meditation. So residents of Golok Vrindavan exist in two manifestations, as sadhakas and as siddhas. So for example, Srila Rupa Goswami simultaneously exists in Gaur Leela as Srila Rupa Goswami, a sadhaka, and in Krishna Leela as Rupa Manjari, a siddha. One should thus meditate upon these Vrajalokas in two ways, externally and internally. Okay. So externally, for example, one who desires to achieve the service and mood of Srila Rupa Goswami would follow in the footsteps of Srila Rupa Goswami's sadhana. Okay, so externally, that's what he would be following. He would follow Srila Rupa Goswami's sadhana. And as we know that the six Goswamis, they were spending most of the time in doing sadhana, chanting the holy names, Sankhya Purvaka Nama Gana Natibi. So that's what is spoken by Srinivas Acharya and the Shad Goswami Ashtaka. So even the six Goswamis, Sankhya Purvaka, they were counting. They had a fixed number of rounds of chanting. So they were chanting the holy names and they were writing books. And that's what they did most of the day. And they hardly ate and slept. So this is the external behavior of the Rupa, of the Raganuga Bhakta. So externally, he follows the sadhana. And Yes, so externally, a devotee who is actually advanced in Krishna consciousness, who's constantly engaged in devotional service, should not manifest himself, as we read, even though he has attained perfection. Activities in devotional service and the regulative principles must be followed even by the pure devotee. And it's internally, for example, one who desires to achieve the service and mode of Srila Rupa Goswami would internally meditate on the activities of Srila Rupa Manjari, nicely described by Raghunath Das Goswami and Vrajavilastava. So this is only an internal meditation. It is not something which is done externally. So these are some of the activities of Rupa Manjari. By offering her betel nuts, by massaging her feet, by bringing her water, by arranging for a secret meeting with Lord Krishna, and by performing many other services, many gopi maid servants affectionately please Shri Radha, who's more dear than life. I take shelter of these gopi maid servants who have Shri Rupa Manjari as their leader. So this is from Prabhupada's book we read. When he realizes his actual position and relationship with the Lord, he can, along with the discharging of regulative service, think within himself of the Lord under the guidance of a particular associate of the Lord and develop his transcendental sentiments and following that associate. So this is only an internal meditation. So Rupa Goswami says, Shravanot Kirtanadini Veda Bhakti Uditani tu Yanyangani Chattanyatra Vigyayani Manishibi. Learned acharyas know that the 64 practices of Vedic Bhakti headed by hearing and chanting are also useful in Raganuga Bhakti. Okay, so in Raganuga Bhakti also, the 64 angas of Bhakti of Vedic sadhana are also applicable there. There also they can follow all these 64 items of devotional service. Yes, so the Raganuga Bhakta does not abandon the regular hearing and chanting, but focuses hearing and chanting about topics that specifically nourish his serving moods. And also he does not abandon worshipping the deity, but he does so in a way conducive to his devotional moods. Okay, so it's not that the Raganuga Bhakta abandons these activities. So he also does hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping the deity. He does all these activities, but he does them in a particular mood in accordance to the eternal associate in Vraja. So now, okay, so there is the Siddha Pranali. Okay, now somebody can read from the book in this connection.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. In this connection, we should be careful about the so-called Siddha Pranali. The Siddha Pranali process is followed by a class of men who are not very authorized and who have manufactured their own way of devotional service. They imagine that they have become associates of the Lord simply by thinking of themselves like that. This external behavior is not at all according to the regulative principles. The so-called Siddha Pranali process is followed by the Prakriti Sahajiya, a pseudo-sect of so-called Vaishnavas. In the opinion of Rupa Goswami, such activities are simply disturbances to the standard way of devotional service. Sri Rupa Goswami says that learned acharyas recommend that we follow the regulative principles even after the development of spontaneous love for Krishna. According to the regulative principles, there are 9 departmental activities as described above, and one should specifically engage himself in the type of devotional service for which he has a natural aptitude. For example, one person may have a particular interest in hearing, another may have a particular interest in chanting, and another may have a particular interest in serving in the temple. So these or any of the other 6 different types of devotional service, remembering, serving, praying, engaging in some particular service, being in a friendly relationship or offering everything in one's possession, should be executed in full earnestness. In this way, everyone should act according to his particular taste. Hare Krishna.
Okay, fine. So this is Siddha Pranali. So that means a process to become Siddha, to become perfect. So now the Prakriti Sahajiyas, so they imagine themselves to be very advanced. And as Prabhupada is writing here, that they manufacture their own way of devotional service and they imagine that they have become associates of the Lord simply by thinking of themselves like that. But the external behavior is not all according to the regulative principles. So these are the deviations of the Prakrita Sahajias, that they imagine that they become associates of the Lord simply by thinking of themselves like that. So can somebody become an associate of the Lord simply by thinking, simply by imagining? No. So maybe some of you have heard, many years back, there was one police inspector in Delhi who went to Vrindavan, and then he posed himself as a gopi. He was wearing gopi dress. And then people are also so ignorant, they started following him and they accepted him as a great devotee and so on. So like that, there are Sahajiyas in Vrindavan who pose themselves to be very advanced, and then ignorant people follow. And then, of course, they make money out of that. So that's, and then they advertise themselves, okay, you become our followers, we'll give you some secret mantra. And then you also can realize your Swarupa in the spiritual world and attain perfection and so on. So that's, so these things don't happen just by imagination. The proposal that the word Brajaloka refers only to the residents of Vrindavan and Krishna Leela, such as Srila Rup Manjari, and not to the residents of Vrindavan and their Gaur Leela, such as Srila Rupa Goswami. So they wrongly interpret Seva Sadhaka Rupena Siddha Rupena Chatrahi to mean that one should imitate the activities of the gopis both as one's external sadhana and as one's internal meditation. Okay, so as we have discussed, there is the Sadhaka Rupena and Siddha Rupena. So externally it is Sadhaka Rupena, internally it is Siddha Rupena. But these Sahajiyas, they misinterpret this and they say that both are the same. So externally also one can behave as the eternal associate, and internally also one can meditate. But that's not what our acharyas have said. So the acharyas have said that externally one behaves as a sadhaka, and only it's an internal meditation that one is acting according to the eternal associate in Braja. And so their external behavior is not according to regulated principles. They may be committing sinful activities and so on. So that's how there are these deviations of these Prakrita Sahajiyas, and they cause a lot of havoc in society by inducing so many people, devotees, to follow them. And as we said, unfortunately, quite a few devotees in ISKCON became attracted to these Sahajiyas, Radha Kund Babajis, and they left ISKCON, and then ultimately they got lost. But the point is, one should be extremely careful, because there is always a tendency to look for shortcuts. Because of a lack of patience, one thinks, oh, how long will I perform Vedi sadhana? Let me do something by which I can immediately become perfect. So then when one tries to get some shortcuts, then this is what happens. Then one tries to follow some of these deviant sects and then leave ISKCON, and then everything is lost. Okay, please read this.
Prabhupada on Raganuga Bhakti. Devotees, I read somewhere in your writings that in order to understand the confidential affairs of Radha and Krishna, one must serve the gopis who are servants of the gopis. And I assume that you were a servant of the gopi. Is that correct? Or how do I serve the servants of the gopis? Srila Prabhupada. Gopis, they are not conditioned souls. They are liberated spirits. So first of all, you have to come out from this conditioned life. Then the question of serving gopis will come. Don't be at the present moment very eager to serve gopi. Just try to get out of your conditional life. Then time will come when you will be able to serve gopi. In this conditional stage, we cannot serve anything.
Continue.
But Krishna gives us opportunities to accept service in this Archa Marga. Just like we keep the deity of Krishna, offer prasada under regulation, under principle. So we have to advance in this way, chanting, hearing, and worshipping in the temple, Aarti offering prasada. In this way, as we advance, automatically Krishna will reveal to you and you'll understand your position, how you have to go. Peace means who are always constantly engaged in the service of the Lord, so that eternal relationship will be revealed. So we have to wait for that. Immediately, we cannot imitate serving gopis. That's good idea that you shall serve gopi, but it will take time. Not immediately. Immediately, we have to follow the rules and regulations and routine work.
Yes, so this is not something one can immediately jump to. So Srila Prabhupada is saying here that so as we advance, automatically Krishna will reveal to you and you'll understand your position. Okay, so we have to follow the Vedi sadhana bhakti. And then as we progress, as we advance, then Krishna will reveal these things, reveal our eternal position in the spiritual world and everything else. So it's a matter of revelation. It's not a matter of imagination. It's not something I can imagine. So as again Prabhupada says, that eternal relationship will be revealed. And so we have to wait for that. Immediately we cannot imitate serving the gopis. So immediately we have to follow the rules and regulations and routine. Okay, read this.
Yamuna. Teachings of Lord Chaitanya says all inhabitants of Brajabhumi, Vrindavan, are very dear to Krishna. A devotee in attachment selects one of the inhabitants and follows in his footsteps in order to be successful. Prabhupada, devoted to the Vrindavan inhabitants. You don't directly think of yourself that I shall see Krishna as my son. Yamuna, no. Prabhupada, that is Mayavad. Yamuna, yes. Prabhupada, you have to follow the footsteps of Yashodama. Yamuna, yes, you told me that before. Prabhupada, then it will be successful.
Yes, so one can never become these eternal associates like Nanda, Yashoda. So that is Mayavad. So just like Mayavadis think they can become Krishna, so similarly they think they can become Nanda, Yashoda, and so on. So no, that's Mayavad. So one can never become these eternal associates, but one can simply follow in their footsteps. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, fine. So now somebody can read from the book. So now the two types of Raganuga Bhakti. So the first one is Kama Rupa. No, sorry, Kamanuga. Kamanuga. So the Prabhupada is putting under the heading of conjugal love. Please read.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. And Pranam, Prabhu. Conjugal love, yeah. Devotional service following the footsteps of the gopis of Vrindavana or the queens at Dwaraka is called devotional service in conjugal love. This devotional service in conjugal love can be divided into two categories. One is indirect conjugal love, the other direct. In both of these categories, one has to follow the particular gopi who is engaged in such service is Goloka Vrindavana. To be directly attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in conjugal love is technically called Keli. This Keli performance means to directly join with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are other devotees who do not wish direct contact with the Supreme Person, but who relish the conjugal love affairs of the Lord with the gopis. Such devotees enjoy simply by hearing of the activities of the Lord with the gopis. Continue, Prabhu.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. This development of conjugal love can be possible only with those who are already engaged in following the regulative principles of devotional service, specifically in the worship of Radha and Krishna in the temple. Such devotees gradually develop a spontaneous love for the deity, and by hearing of the Lord's exchange of loving affairs with the gopis, they gradually become attracted to these pastimes. After this spontaneous attraction becomes highly developed, the devotee is placed in either of the above mentioned categories.
Continue.
Yeah. Sure. This development of conjugal love for Krishna is not manifested in women only. The material body has nothing to do with the spiritual loving affairs. A woman may develop an attitude for becoming a friend of Krishna, and similarly, a man may develop the feature of becoming a gopi in Vrindavana. How a devotee in the form of a man can desire to become a gopi is stated in the Padma Purana as follows. In days gone there were many sages in Dandakaranya. Dandakaranya is the name of the forest where Lord Ramachandra lived after being banished by his father for 14 years. At that time, there were many advanced sages who were captivated by the beauty of Lord Ramachandra and who desired to become women in order to embrace the Lord. Later on, these sages appeared in Gokula Vrindavana when Krishna advented himself there, and they were born as gopis, or girlfriends of Krishna. In this way, they attained the perfection of spiritual life. This story of the sages of Dandakaranya can be explained as follows. When Lord Ramchandra was residing in Dandakaranya, the sages who were engaged in devotional service, there, became attracted by his beauty and immediately thought of the gopis in Vrindavana, who enjoyed conjugal loving affection with Krishna. In this instance, it is clear that the sages of Dandakaranya desired conjugal love in manner of the gopis, although they were well aware of the Supreme Lord as both Krishna and Lord Ramchandra. They knew that although Ramchandra was an ideal king and could not accept more than one wife, Lord Krishna, being the full-fledged personality of Godhead, could fulfill the desires of all of them in Vrindavana. These sages also concluded that the form of Lord Krishna is more attractive than that of Lord Ramachandra, and so they prayed to become gopis in their future lives to be associated with Krishna. Lord Ramachandra remained silent, and his silence shows that he accepted the prayers of the sages. Thus, they were blessed by Lord Ramachandra to have association with Lord Krishna in their future lives. As a result of this benediction, they all took birth as women in the wombs of gopis at Gokula, and as they had desired in the previous lives, they enjoyed the company of Lord Krishna, who was present at the time in Gokula Vrindavana. The perfection of their human form of life was thus achieved by their generating a transcendental sentiment to share conjugal love with Lord Krishna. Conjugal love is divided into two classifications, namely conjugal love as husband and wife, and conjugal love as lover and beloved. One who develops conjugal love for Krishna as a wife is promoted to Dwaraka, where the devotee becomes the queen of the Lord. One who develops conjugal love for Krishna as a lover is promoted to Goloka Vrindavana to associate with the gopis and enjoy loving affairs with Krishna there. We should note carefully, however, that this conjugal love for Krishna, either as gopi or as queen, is not limited only to women. Even men can develop such sentiments, as was evidenced by the sages of Dandakaranya. If someone simply desires conjugal love but does not follow in the footsteps of the gopis, he is promoted to association with the Lord at Dwaraka. In the Mahakurma Purana, it is stated, great sages who were the sons of fire gods rigidly follow the regulative principles in their desire to have conjugal love for Krishna. As such, in their next lives, they were able to associate with the Lord, the origin of all creation, who is known as Vasudeva or Krishna, and all of them got him as their husband. Thank
Okay.
you, Prabhu.
So this is Kamanuga Bhakti. So this is of two types, direct and indirect. So the direct is called as Keli, where one desires a direct association with the Lord, and indirect is association with the gopis. And then another important point that Prabhupada is explaining here is that the material body has nothing to do with one's eternal relationship with the Lord in the spiritual world. Okay, so the material body is, after all, temporary, and we are eternal spirit souls. So therefore, somebody having a woman's body here in the material world may become a cowherd boy or an elderly gopa or somebody like that. And somebody who's having a male body here on the earthly planet. So he may become a gopi in the spiritual world. So there's no relationship between what is the material body in this life and the spiritual body in the spiritual world. So there's no relationship. So that, and to explain that point, he's giving this whole story of the sages of Dandakaranya. And then conjugal love is also classified into these two varieties. That is, conjugal love as husband and wife, that is called as swakiya. And as lover and beloved, that is called as parakiya. Okay, so as Prabhupada is writing over here, we should note carefully, however, that this conjugal love for Krishna, either as gopi or queen, is not limited only to women. Even men can develop such sentiments as women. Now, if someone simply desires conjugal love but does not follow in the footsteps of the gopis, he is promoted to association with the Lord at Dwarka. Okay, so therefore, one point we should remember is that in ISKCON, we are all followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so, as we know that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Radha and Krishna. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nayanya. And so therefore, by following Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we're actually following Srimati Radharani, who is the most perfect Ragatmika Bhakta in the spiritual world. And so therefore, by following Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, actually we get a direct entrance into Raganuga Bhakti. So even without doing something separately to practice Raganuga, simply by following in the footsteps by following the instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu coming down in Parampara, and for us through Srila Prabhupada, so we are getting a direct entrance into Raganuga Bhakti. And so that is the speciality of following Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And therefore Rupa Goswami glorified him as Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prem Padaite Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratisha. So this is what is very, very special about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And by following him, we directly gain an entrance into Raganuga Bhakti and getting Krishna Prem. So we don't have to do something separately for that. And so therefore, Srila Prabhupada, as His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj would often say, don't leave ISKCON. So ISKCON is a very authorized movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so by simply practicing devotional service in this movement, one gets a direct entrance into Golok Vrindavan because one is actually following Srimati Radharani. Otherwise, normally, if one does not follow in the footsteps of the residents of Raja, one can enter into Vaikuntha, Dwarka, and other places. But this is a speciality of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that by following him, one gets a direct entrance into Golok Vrindavan. Okay, fine. And then the other one is the Sambandhanuga. So please read the other part, parenthood or friendship.
Sure, Prabhu. Parenthood or friendship. Devotees who are attracted to Krishna as parents or as friends should follow in the footsteps of Nanda Maharaja or Subala, respectively. Nanda Maharaja is the foster father of Krishna. And out of all of the friends of Krishna, Subala is the most intimate in Vrajabhumi. In the development of becoming either the father or friend of the Lord, there are two varieties. One method is that one may try to become the father of the Lord directly, and the other is that one may follow Nanda Maharaja and cherish the ideal of being Krishna's father. Out of these two, the attempt to directly become the father of Krishna is not recommended. Such a development can become polluted with Mayavada, impersonal philosophy. The Mayavadis or monists think that they themselves are Krishna. And if one thinks that he himself has become Nanda Maharaja, then his parental love will become contaminated with the Mayavada philosophy. The Mayavada philosophical way of thinking is offensive, and no offender can enter into the kingdom of God to associate with Krishna. In the Skanda Purana, there is a story of an old man residing in Astinapura, capital of the kingdom of the Pandus, who desired Krishna as his beloved son. This old man was instructed by Narada to follow in the footsteps of Nanda Maharaja, and thus he achieved success. There is a statement in the Narayana Vyuhastava prayers that persons who are always engaged in thinking of the Lord as their husband, friend, father, or well-wisher are always worshipable by everyone. This spontaneous love for Krishna can be developed only by the special mercy of Krishna or his pure devotee. This process of devotional service is sometimes called Pushti Marga. Pushti means nourishing, Marga means path. Such development of sentiment nourishes devotional service to the highest standard. Thus, it is called the path of nourishment or Pushti Marga. The Vallabha Sampradaya, which belongs to Vishnu Swami sect of Vaishnava religion, worships Krishna in this Pushti Marga. Generally, devotees in Gujarat worship Balakrishna under this heading of Pushti Marga.
Okay, so as we discussed, nobody can become Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda. So that's Mayavad. So Prabhupada is explaining that here. So one can only follow in the footsteps of these eternal associates of Braja. And then worshipping Krishna as Bal Krishna or Bal Gopal, Laddu Gopal, all this is Pushti Marg, okay, of Vallabh Sampradaya. So as far as we Gaudiya Vaishnavas are concerned, our goal is to worship Radha Krishna. That is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has taught us. And so therefore, this is not in our parampara to worship these forms of Krishna as a child. Okay, so that's the end of Raganuga Bhakti. Any questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, so can we keep Laddu Gopal in our altar?
That you can decide. But as I just said, it's not in our parampara. None of our acharyas have taught us. Srila Prabhupada has not taught us. Our goal is to worship Radha Krishna.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I have a question. We say that the devotees of the Lord, so they will continue to do the same things as we are doing over here in terms of chanting all the 9 devotional.
What?
Services.
It's not clear. Can you speak a little louder, please?
I'm saying, as devotees of the Lord, so if we go to Goluka Vrindavan, we will continue to do the same things of chanting, Smaran, Kirtan, and other processes of devotional service. So my question is, what does Mayavadi, what is there written in scriptures, or if you're aware of that, what does if Mayavadis would do when they are in Brahman? So how do they get engaged? So what is it that they do?
See, first of all, I don't know whether this has been covered in Bhagavad Gita. It is supposed to be covered in Bhagavad Gita, actually. So see, as Prabhupada is writing over here, the Mayavad philosophical way of thinking is offensive, and no offender can enter into the kingdom of God to associate with Krishna. So they cannot even enter into the kingdom of God. Forget about associating with the Lord. So actually the Mayavadis, because they're offensive, they cannot even go into the impersonal Brahman. Their only destination is hell. So it's only the impersonalists who don't offend the Lord, they can enter into the impersonal Brahman. But the impersonalists who offend the Lord, they're technically called as Mayavadis because they consider the form of the Lord to be Maya, material. So therefore, that's a great offense, and therefore they cannot even enter into the impersonal Brahman, actually. And the impersonalists who don't offend the Lord, they have a proper understanding that the Supreme Lord is transcendental, then they can get entrance to the impersonal Brahman. And in the impersonal Brahman, they're just there. It's neutrality. Brahman means just neutral. They don't have any service, nothing. But it is Shanti. There are no miseries because it's a spiritual atmosphere. But at the same time, there's no service. And so because there is no service, even these impersonalists, they fall down from the Brahma Jyoti. That's what the Bhagavatam is saying. So that's what happens.
Okay, so it is only as a meditation, or it is with no like real engagement.
Yes, no
They are
engagement. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so then we go to chapter 17, that is Bhava Bhakti. So this is the definition of Bhava Bhakti. So anyway, we can first read from Srila Prabhupada's book, the first paragraph. Somebody read the first paragraph.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hi.
By the process of ecstatic love, by the process of by the chapter 17, Prabhuji.
Okay, yes.
By the process of executing regulated devotional service, one is actually elevated onto the transcendental stage, beyond the material modes of nature. At that time, one's heart becomes illuminated like the sun. The sun is far above the planetary systems, and there is no possibility of its being covered by any kind of cloud. Similarly, when a devotee is purified like the sun from his pure heart, there is a diffusion of ecstatic love, which is more glorious than the sunshine. Only at the time is the attachment to Krishna. Only at that time is the attachment to Krishna perfect. Spontaneously, the devotee becomes eager to serve the Lord in his ecstatic love. At this stage, the devotee is on the platform of Uttamadhikari, perfect devotion. Such a devotee has no agitation from material affections and is interested only in the service of Radha and Krishna.
Okay, so here as being mentioned, the devotee is beyond the material modes of nature. Okay, so it's on the liberated platform, Uttamadhikari. So the definition of Bhava Bhakti is this: Shuddha Sattva Visheshatma Prema Suryam Shu Samya Bhak Ruchibhi Chitta.
The slides are not moving.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, Raj.
Okay, Shuddha Sattva Visheshatma Prema Suryam Shu Samya Bhak Ruchibhi Chitta Mashranya Kridasau Bhava Uchate. When devotional service is situated on the transcendent platform of pure goodness, it is like a ray of the sunlight of love for Krishna. At such a time, devotional service causes the heart to be softened by various tastes, and it is called bhava, emotion. Okay, so this is pure goodness, Shuddha Sattva. It's on the transcendental platform. There is no contamination by the three modes. And this is the beginning of love for Krishna. So therefore, it's like a ray of sunlight. So Bhava Bhakti Swarup Lakshan is Shuddha Sattva Visheshatma, stage in which Shuddha Sattva enters the devotee's heart. When a person eagerly wants to serve the Lord, the Shuddha Sattva potency may enter his heart through the mercy of a pure devotee. Okay, so this mercy of the pure devotee is always required, even at the Bhava stage. Krishna never gives mercy directly. We must always remember this Siddhanta. Krishna never gives directly. So it's always through the mercy of the pure devotee. And when Shuddha Sattva touches the heart, it energizes the seed of prema and causes it to sprout, ankura. Consequently, Srila Rupa Goswami describes Bhava as Premankura, the first sprout of Prema. So essentially the Swarup Lakshana of Bhava Bhakti is Shuddha Sattva. Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam. So it is also called as the Vasudeva platform. So just like Vasudeva gives birth to Vasudeva Krishna. So similarly, the Vasudeva platform or the Vasudeva stage is the stage at which Krishna actually becomes manifest. So it's the purified stage. free from the three modes. So basically, the Shuddha Sattva stage is comprising of the Samvit Shakti and the Ladini Shakti. So Samvit Shakti is the Lord's cognitive potency, which descends into the heart and empowers one to perceive and know Krishna. And the Ladini Shakti is the Lord's pleasure or devotional potency, which descends into the devotee's heart, empowering him to fully manifest blissful love of Godhead. So the combination of Samvit and Ladini is called Shuddha Sattva. When one is in contact with Shuddha Sattva, one simultaneously feels nourishment, pushti, and satisfaction, tushti. The Samvit potency nourishes one by cognition of Krishna, and the Ladini potency satisfies one by devotion for Krishna. Now, Bhavakti's Tatastha Lakshan, or the secondary characteristics, are Chitta Masranya, softens the heart. So it's quoting from the Bhagavatam second canto, certainly that heart is steel framed, which in spite of chanting the holy name with concentration, does not change when ecstasy takes place and tears fill the eyes and hairs down. So here the heart becomes softened in Bhava Bhakti. One's heart softens to such an extent that is often found to be visibly moved by emotions, ecstatic symptoms. The second Tatastha Lakshana is Ruchibi, gives rise to various tastes like Prapti Abhilash, desire to achieve Krishna, Anukulya Abhilash, desire to please Krishna with various services, and Sauharda Abhilash, desire to be close at heart with Krishna. So these are all various tastes, various desires that manifest in Bhava Bhakti. Okay, now the next point is achieving Bhava Bhakti. So one can achieve Bhava Bhakti from Vedi sadhana. So one practices Vedi sadhana bhakti and or Raganuga sadhana bhakti, and then comes to the platform of Bhava. And another way is by causeless mercy. Okay, so the example of from Vedi sadhana bhakti to Bhava is Narad Muni. And the example of Raganuga to Bhava is an example from the Padma Puran, a lady named Chandrakanti. So now let's read from Prabhupada's book. Okay, so somebody can read the third paragraph. Elevation to the stage of ecstasy.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam. Elevation to this stage of ecstasy can be possible in two ways. One way is by constant association with pure devotees. The other way is by special mercy of Krishna or by mercy of a pure devotee of Krishna. Elevation to the ecstatic stage of life is generally attained through association with pure devotees, while elevation to that stage by the special mercy of Krishna or his devotees is very rare. The purport is that one should execute devotional service rigidly in the association of devotees so that there will be certainty in raising oneself to that ecstatic position. In special cases, of course, there is special favor from Krishna. And although we should always expect that, we should not sit idly and simply wait for Krishna's special mercy. The regular duties must be performed. It is just as when sometimes it is found that a person who never attended school or college may be recognized as a great scholar or an honorary degree from great universities may be offered to him. But this does not mean that one should avoid school and expect to automatically receive any honorary degree from some university. Similarly, one should devotedly execute the regulative principles of devotional service and at the same time hope for Krishna's favor or for his devotees' favor.
Okay, so this coming to the platform of Bhava by causeless mercy of Krishna or his devotee, that's something which is very rare. Most devotees, they have to practice sadhana bhakti, and from sadhana bhakti come to the platform of Bhava. So Prabhupada is going to example of getting honorary degrees from university. So sometimes we find somebody who has contributed a lot to society, some politicians, social welfare workers, they may be offered honorary degrees by the university, even though they may not have been well educated. But that does not mean that we can also not go to school and college and expect to get such honorary degrees. What is the probability that one can get an honorary degree like that? It's very rare. So similarly, getting such causeless mercy of the Lord or his devotees without practicing sadhana is very rare. So therefore, in most cases, we have to practice sadhana bhakti, and then we can become qualified for bhava bhakti. Now, in the next paragraph, Prabhupada is basically giving the example of Narad Muni. As we know, Narad Muni in the previous life, he was the son of a maid servant, and then he served the great souls, the Bhakti Vedantas, and that's how he came, and that's how then he had darshan of the Lord, and that's how he came to the platform of bhava and then finally prema. So that's the entire next paragraph. So now, okay, then continue reading from there. These are practical examples.
These are practical examples of how one can develop to the stage of ecstatic love simply by the association of pure devotees. It is essential, therefore, that one constantly associate with pure devotees who are engaged morning and evening in chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. In this way, one will get the chance to purify his heart and develop this ecstatic pure love for Krishna.
Continue.
Should I continue, Prabhuji?
Yes.
This statement is also confirmed in the third canto, 25th chapter, verse 25 of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Lord Kapila says, "My dear mother, when a person is actually in association with pure devotees, the sublime potency of my devotional service can be experienced." In other words, when a pure devotee speaks, his words act upon the hearts of the audience. What is the secret of hearing and chanting? A professional speaker cannot impress transcendental ecstasy within the hearts of the listeners. However, when a realized soul who is engaged in the service of the Lord is speaking, he has the potency to inject spiritual life within the audience. One should therefore seek the association of such pure unalloyed devotees, and by such association and service, a neophyte devotee will certainly develop attachment.
Love
In
and
the Padma
devotion.
Purana, there.
Wait. So here, Srila Prabhupada is talking about this first case where by Vedi Bhakti, one can elevate oneself to Bhava Bhakti. So that's usually the case. So one has to hear from pure devotees. And then Prabhupada is explaining that what's the potency. So because one is pure, self-realized, then when one hears from such a person, then the devotion within the heart becomes awakened. One should therefore seek the association of such pure unalloyed devotees. And then one can be elevated to the Bhava platform. So that's the first case. Now, okay, now we can continue reading in the Padma Purana.
In the
Or maybe
Padma
somebody.
Purana, there
I think so
is
there's
a
some problem with your
story of
internet.
a neophyte.
There's some problem with your
Hare
internet. I
Krishna.
think maybe somebody else can read.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, in the Padma Purana, there is the story of a neophyte devotee who, in order to raise herself to the ecstatic platform,
A little louder, please.
Can you hear me now, Prabhuji?
Yes.
In the Padma Purana, there is the story of a neophyte devotee who, in order to raise herself to the ecstatic platform, danced all night to invoke the Lord's grace upon her.
Sometimes, okay, so this is this lady named Chandrakanti. She wanted Lord Krishna as her husband, And so then she danced all night. And so then she came to the Raganuga platform, and from Raganuga Bhava, so that example was given. Okay, continue.
Sometimes, however, it is found that without undergoing any devotional process, one all of a sudden develops devotion for Lord Krishna. The sudden development of the devotional attitude in a person must be understood as a special mercy of Krishna or of his devotee. This apparently accidental development of ecstatic feelings through the causeless mercy of Krishna can be divided into three groups: simply by speaking, simply by glancing, and simply by good wishes. In
Okay,
the Narad,
so this is by causeless mercy, special mercy. So one has not done sadhana bhakti and all that, but one just gets mercy of the Lord or his pure devotees, and one immediately comes to the platform of bhava. As we said, this is very rare. So by three ways it can happen: words, that's vachika, glances, darshan dana, and good wishes, harda. Okay, so now continue. So now you'll see examples of each one of these that Prabhupada is describing. Go ahead.
in the Naradiya Purana, there is a statement about development of ecstatic love simply by speaking. Lord Krishna said to Narada, "O best of the Brahmanas, I wish that you may develop unalloyed devotional service to me, which is full of transcendental bliss and all auspiciousness." In the Skanda Purana, there is a statement about developing ecstatic love towards Krishna simply by glancing. It is stated there, when the inhabitants of Jangala province saw the personality of Godhead Krishna, they were so stricken with feeling that they could not withdraw their glance from him. As far as heartfelt wishes are concerned, there is a statement in Shuka Samhita where Narada tells Srila Vyasdev, "You have a son who is the greatest devotee of the personality of Godhead, and I can observe that without any following of the regulative principles of devotional service, he is already enriched with many of the symptoms achieved by the execution of devotional service after many, many births." As for ecstatic love of Krishna, there is a statement in the 7th canto, 4th chapter, verse 36 of Srimad Bhagavatam, in which Narada addresses King Yudhishthira, "My dear king, it is very difficult to describe the character of Prahlada. He developed a natural attraction for Krishna, and whatever I can explain about his character will simply be an arrangement of words. His actual character is impossible to describe." This means that Narada himself admitted that the natural development of Prahlada's ecstatic love was by the grace of Lord Krishna. This natural attraction for Krishna on the part of Prahlada was developed simply by the mercy of Narada. When Prahlad Maharaj was within the womb of his mother, she was being sympathetically instructed by Narada about the science of devotional service, and at the same time, Narada was wishing that the child within the womb could also take advantage of the instructions. Because Narada, an authorized devotee and great associate of the personality of Godhead, was desiring auspiciousness for Prahlad Maharaj, he developed all the characteristics of a high-grade devotee. This is called natural attraction. It is caused by the special grace of the personality of Godhead or by the special grace of a great devotee like Narada. There's a statement on the in the Skanda Purana wherein Parvata Muni tells Narada, "My dear Narada, of all saintly persons, you are so great and glorious that simply by your good wishes, a low-born hunter also has become a great elevated devotee of Lord Krishna." This ecstatic love for Krishna can be divided into 5 divisions, which will be described by Srila Goswami later on.
Okay, so the example in the Skanda Purana is Mrigari. So we know the story of Mrigari, how he got the special mercy of Narad Muni. So in this way, there are these 3 ways one can get the causeless mercy of Krishna or his devotees. And these are the examples for each of them. Okay, so these are basically the different ways one can come to the platform of Bhava Bhakti. Any questions? Okay, fine. So if there are no questions, we'll stop for today. And our next class will be on Wednesday. And so on Wednesday, I think so we can finish the next 2 chapters, the 18th and the 19th chapter.
Prabhuji,
Okay.
will it not be Monday? Monday there is no class?
No, you didn't get the information.
No,
No,
Prabhuji.
Prabhu. No, Prabhu. We have not got any info.
Lilan Prabhu didn't announce. Is Lilan Prabhu there?
Yes,
Lilan
Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
So you told them?
No, Prabhu, you have not yet announced. Actually, there is a little surprise thing there. So, no, there is a surprise. There is a surprise plan. So I could not.
Okay.
Yeah,
But there's no class on Monday, right?
Yes, Prabhu. On Wednesday. it is there.
Okay. So our next class is on Wednesday.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu ki jai, Shri Rupa Goswami Pad ki jai, Samved Gaur Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.